The terminal at Roosevelt International Airport buzzed with the usual Friday mayhem, rolling suitcases, echoed announcements, and hurried travelers weaving through the crowd. Near Gate 9, a woman in her early 70s stood with an upright poise that came not just from posture, but from a lifetime of perseverance. Her name was Evelyn Brooks, a sharp-eyed black woman wearing a weathered olive coat, hand in hand with her husband, Louis Brooks, who walked beside her in a well-loved overcoat that had seen better winters. As they approached the first-class lane, a flight attendant stepped in front of them like a wall of frost. Melinda Crane, her platinum blonde ponytail tight and bouncing, looked them up and down with open disdain before snapping, "Coach is that way. Let's not make a scene." Her eyes narrowed as she added louder, "You two don't belong here." A nearby gate agent glanced nervously at the list, muttering under his breath, "Actually, they're on the manifest." But Melinda scoffed, dismissing the remark with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand, her smile thin and sarcastic. She had no idea that this single moment of prejudice would cost her everything. Evelyn, unfazed, stood tall at the entrance to the premium boarding area. In her hand were 2 spotless boarding passes, embossed, undeniable. She met Melinda's eyes head-on, not with fear, but with something far more powerful: certainty. The surrounding noise, rolling wheels, overhead announcements, rushed steps, seemed to fade as Melinda yanked the tickets from Evelyn's hand. With barely a glance, she flung them back toward the desk. "Nice try," she smirked. "Fake tickets won't get you into first class, ma'am." Evelyn's chest rose slowly, not with panic, but with the simmering heat of a familiar injustice. Her gray-streaked hair and frugal outfit apparently disqualified her from luxury in the eyes of this stranger. To Melinda, she wasn't elegance wrapped in simplicity. She was a fraud. Louis, tall and silver-haired, stood silently beside his wife. He adjusted his glasses with a slow precision, his eyes never leaving Melinda's face. Behind the lenses, a fire glowed, not of anger, but of control. His stillness spoke volumes. All around them, the scene began to shift. A man in a tailored Navy suit leaned against a column nearby, his voice just loud enough for others to hear. "They've clearly wandered into the wrong part of the airport." His snide comment triggered murmurs, judgments. A woman in a fur-trimmed jacket whispered, "Maybe they're looking for a handout." Evelyn didn't flinch. Instead, she picked up the boarding passes and calmly slid them back across the counter. "Look again," she said. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be." Melinda's cheeks flushed, her smile tightening into something uglier. She leaned in, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "Sweetheart, I know a scam when I see one." The man in the suit chuckled louder, his briefcase swinging at his side. "What's next? Claiming to own the plane?" he sneered to the fur-clad woman, who let out a cold laugh in reply. It wasn't just humiliation. It was routine, one Evelyn had endured far too many times in her life. But that didn't mean she would ever accept it. She took a long, steady breath. Then she said clearly, "Call your supervisor." The words rang like a bell, not loud, but unmistakable. Melinda rolled her eyes and reached for her radio with performative frustration. "Security, we've got a situation at Gate 9, she snapped. "Possible trespassers in the first-class lane. Send someone." The crowd began to stir. Heads turned. Phone cameras blinked to life. A teenager in a hoodie smirked as she began recording. Melinda crossed her arms like she'd already won. Within moments, 2 security officers arrived, stocky, grim-faced men in Navy uniforms. Their boots thudded as they approached. "These 2 are trying to sneak into first class with fake passes," Melinda announced proudly, pointing at Evelyn and Louis. "Deal with it?" One of the guards paused. "You sure?" he asked quietly, eyes flicking to the boarding passes. "I said what I said," Melinda barked. Evelyn's pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the absurdity of watching her dignity put on trial by strangers in uniforms and strangers with smartphones. Louis stepped forward, his voice low but powerful. I suggest you check the list again before you make a bigger fool of yourselves." Melinda let out a harsh laugh and waved at their modest clothing. "Please, look at them. You don't need a list to know they don't belong here. Cheap shoes and coats don't exactly scream first class." The suited businessman clapped his hands with glee. Someone finally said it. The teenager with the phone zoomed in, delighted. "This is going viral," she whispered. One of the guards stepped forward, reaching for the tickets still resting on the desk. His fingers brushed the paper, but before he could read them, Melinda snatched them again, her nails clicking like claws. "Don't bother," she hissed. "They're nobodies." Evelyn's jaw tensed, but her voice was calm. "You're making a mistake, one you'll regret." A beat of silence hung heavy. Then the second guard muttered into his radio, requesting supervisor at Gate 9. "Something's not adding up here." Melinda scoffed loudly, arms crossed, ponytail flicking with every movement. What's not adding up is how they thought this would work. Move them, now. The crowd leaned in, a wall of eyes, some amused, some annoyed. A woman in a red scarf whispered, "Always looking for trouble." Evelyn felt the weight of it all. The assumptions, the spectacle, the ugly history repeating itself yet again. Louis gently reached for her hand, his presence steady, his stare unrelenting. The suited man grinned. "This is better than cable." The teenager giggled, camera still rolling, red light blinking. Evelyn's heart pounded, not from shame, but from something far more dangerous. A fire she'd carried for decades. A fire built from courtroom battles, denied loans, subtle slights, and loud lies. A fire that had never gone out. One of the guards reached for Louis's arm, and Louis stepped back, his tone stone cold. "Touch me, and you'll answer for it." The guard froze, uncertainty flickering across his face. His radio crackled. "Supervisor en route. Hold position." For the first time, Melinda's smirk faltered, but only for a second. She leaned toward Evelyn, her breath hot, her voice low. "Enjoy the back of the plane. It's where you belong." Evelyn didn't blink. Her stare cut through the venom like glass through smoke. Behind her, the footsteps of the supervisor echoed louder with each step, a distant storm finally rolling in. "Touch me, and you'll regret it," Louis Brooks said calmly, his voice low and steady. The words sliced through the thick tension, stopping the guard cold. A flicker of doubt played across the officer's face as his radio crackled again. A voice came through. "Supervisor en route. Hold off for now." Melinda Crane's smug expression twitched for the first time, but she recovered quickly, stepping closer to Evelyn. Her breath hot with venom, she whispered, "It's over for you. Enjoy economy. That's where you belong." But Evelyn didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on Melinda's with a fierce calm, her mind already calculating the cost of this moment. She knew this wasn't just some misunderstanding. Melinda had lit a fuse in a room full of dry kindling, and the spark was catching. Behind them, the crowd stirred louder, a wave of jeers swelling like a chant. "Kick them out," someone shouted. "They don't belong." The air pulsed with scorn. Evelyn straightened her spine. Her presence, quiet but resolute, cut against the mob like a lighthouse against a storm. She wouldn't bend. Not now. Not ever. In the chaos, Louis stood silent beside her, still as a statue. His silence had weight, not passivity, but power. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. The man in the crisp navy suit clapped his hands again, the sound sharp. "Finally," he said with glee, "someone's putting them in their place." A woman in a fur-lined coat beside him nodded with satisfaction. Took long enough? But Evelyn? Evelyn let a small smile tug at the corner of her mouth. Just a flicker, because she'd heard it all before, and every time she'd proven people like them wrong. The security guards lingered awkwardly, unsure now. One of them glanced at the ticket still held in Melinda's tightly curled fingers. Evelyn Brooks. Louis Brooks. The names didn't mean anything to him, not yet, but something about the way they stood made him hesitate. Then came the echo of polished shoes against tile. The crowd hushed slightly as the shadow of authority stretched toward them. The supervisor had arrived. He pushed through the onlookers like a current, his clipboard trembling slightly in one hand. His bald head reflected the overhead airport lights. Nathan Kessler, Roosevelt International's on-duty supervisor, stopped in front of the gate, eyes sweeping the scene. His gaze darted to the flight attendant holding the tickets. "Melinda," he said sharply, "give me those." Melinda hesitated, her grin faltering. "They're fakes, Nate. Don't waste your time." But Nathan wasn't listening. He snatched the tickets from her hand, flipping them over and scanning the names. His jaw slackened and his face turned pale. The tickets were real, VIP codes at the bottom, bold names, Evelyn Brooks and Louis Brooks, not just passengers, priority level. His head snapped up, meeting Evelyn's steady brown eyes, then Louis's unreadable stare. You're cleared for first class," Nathan stammered. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." "Sir, please, board at your convenience." Evelyn's lips curved into the faintest smile, the quiet kind that came from knowing she'd earned every inch of respect and didn't need to ask for it. She looped her arm through Louis's, her worn coat brushing his sleeve, and they stepped past Melinda. The crowd parted like water. Melinda's face cracked, her smug mask shattering like glass under pressure. One of the guards rubbed the back of his neck, muttering to the other, "Told you something was off." The man in the suit stared, his smirk gone. The fur-coated woman whispered, "How'd they pull that off?" Evelyn's heart lifted, just slightly. Relief was rare and delicate, and in that moment it washed over her like a tide. She and Louis settled into their seats, wide cushioned leather in the front of the plane. The chill of Melinda's words still clung to her, but she let herself exhale. Maybe, she thought, maybe the worst is behind us. Louis adjusted his glasses, still quiet. His presence, steady and sure, made her feel anchored. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "We showed them," she whispered. But her confidence was short-lived. As the plane taxied, Melinda stormed down the aisle, heels striking the floor like gunshots. Her face was a mask of fury. She stopped beside their seats and leaned in close, her voice a seething hiss only they could hear. "You don't deserve to be here," she spat, "but don't worry, I'll fix it." Evelyn's stomach twisted. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Before she could respond, Melinda spun on her heel, her clipboard slapping her thigh as she marched to the galley. The plane took off. Evelyn sipped from a crystal glass, trying to steady her nerves. Nathan's apology replayed in her mind, the silence that had fallen over the crowd as her name was confirmed. Maybe, just maybe. Then came the chaos. Melinda reappeared like a ghost, a tray in her hands and a smirk on her lips. She walked past Evelyn and tripped, her body pitching just enough to send hot, black coffee spilling straight into Evelyn's lap. The liquid soaked through her skirt, searing her thighs. Steam hissed into the air. Evelyn gasped, her hands flying to the burn. Melinda blinked with mock innocence. "Oops," she cooed. "Guess I'm a little clumsy today." Laughter erupted. The man in the bow tie snorted. "She's already making a scene." A woman with gold hoops whispered, "Should have just stayed in coach." Evelyn sat in stunned silence, her hands trembling. Not from pain, from fury. She was being humiliated again. Her ownership of the airline erased in an instant by Melinda's petty, calculated revenge. Louis shot to his feet, his voice a thunderclap. "Get a towel. Now." But Melinda just shrugged and sauntered away, swaying her hips like she'd just won a pageant. Evelyn tried to dab at the mess with cocktail napkins, each press of her fingers awakening the raw sting of the burn. Her thoughts spiraled. That whisper, "I'll fix it," was more than a warning. It was a plan. She glanced at Louis, his jaw clenched. His fingers tapped the armrest in a rhythm she knew by heart. He was angry. And thinking. The man in the bow tie leaned over again. "Guess not everyone's cut out for first class," he chuckled. Evelyn met his eyes, her voice low but laced with steel. "You'd be surprised who it's for." He laughed again, oblivious. But Melinda wasn't finished. She returned, flicking a damp rag onto Evelyn's lap without looking at her. "There," she said coolly. "Happy now?" Evelyn caught the cloth, her hands now shaking, not from pain, but from rage. She locked eyes with Melinda one last time. No words passed between them, but a vow was made. This wasn't over, not even close. Evelyn Brooks didn't need to say a word. Her eyes did the speaking, steel meeting spite as she stared down Melinda Crane, vowing without voice that this wasn't over, not even close. The plane leveled off, the seatbelt sign dimming with a soft chime. The engine's steady hum settled over the cabin like a false sense of calm, but Evelyn's thoughts were anything but quiet. The sting on her thighs still throbbed from the boiling coffee Melinda had accidentally poured into her lap. But the real burn was deeper. In her chest, in her pride. She folded the damp rag in her lap with surgical precision, each crease sharp, her jaw set tight. For decades she'd dealt with people like Melinda, people who judged her age, her skin, her silence, and thought they could stomp her into silence. She knew better, and she'd fought harder. "Tell me again," Evelyn whispered to herself, "who doesn't belong?" Behind her, voices still chuckled. The bald man in the front row tilted his head toward the woman with the hoop earrings, both of them smiling as if they were watching a show. Their laughter floated back to Evelyn's ears like a second slap to the face. But she forced herself to breathe. Louis, still silent beside her, traced the edge of his glasses as he gazed out the window, the sky an endless ocean beyond the glass. His calm hadn't broken, but Evelyn knew better. Calm wasn't weakness. It was pressure waiting to explode. Then came the click of heels. Sharp, measured, intentional. Melinda emerged from the galley, her blue eyes gleaming, her clipboard tucked tightly under one arm. She paused by their seats, flashing a toothy grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Comfortable now?" she asked sweetly. "Wouldn't want you to feel out of place?" Evelyn's jaw clenched. "We're fine. Just do your job." Melinda's grin only widened, her expression flickering with something darker, before she turned and disappeared behind the curtain. Minutes passed. The tension in the cabin softened into a buzz of magazine pages, turning, soda cans cracking open, and earbuds popping in. Evelyn leaned back slightly, forcing herself to relax, to believe the worst might be over. She was wrong. A crackle burst from the plane's speakers. Melinda's voice rang out over the intercom, falsely cheerful but razor-sharp. "Attention passengers. We've had a theft on board. Someone's wallet has gone missing, and I saw who took it." Gasps echoed. Heads turned. Melinda burst back into the cabin, holding up a sleek black wallet Evelyn had never seen before. Her finger jabbed the air like a dagger. "It was him!" she shouted, pointing directly at Louis. Evelyn's stomach flipped. The bald man gasped audibly, his expression delighted. The woman with the hoops clutched her purse tighter. "I knew it," she hissed. "They never looked right for first class." Louis stiffened, but said nothing. Evelyn's pulse thundered as Melinda pointed toward his carry-on bag. "Check it," she demanded. "I saw him slide it in there." The captain's voice cut through, low and grim. "This is your captain. Please remain calm. We are handling the situation." A woman in a silk blouse recoiled from across the aisle. "He looks the type," she whispered, eyes wide with suspicion. A teenager on the other side of the cabin raised his phone, filming again. "Yo, this is nuts," he mumbled to his camera. Evelyn was already on her feet. "That's a lie," she shouted over the noise. "He didn't take anything." But Melinda was already in motion, unzipping Louis's bag before anyone could stop her. With dramatic flair, she reached in and pulled out the wallet. It was there, just as she'd planned. The room tilted. Evelyn could hardly believe it. Melinda had taken this from petty cruelty to calculated sabotage. Louis's face darkened. "You planted that," he said, his voice low but laced with fury. "And you know it." But the passengers weren't listening. Bias and fear were louder than reason. "Get them off this plane!" the bald man shouted, his voice booming. "I don't feel safe." Evelyn's mind raced. She knew what was happening, knew this wasn't just an escalation. It was war. She grabbed the wallet from Melinda's hand, flipping it open with trembling fingers. Inside, a picture. A white man. Blonde hair. Blue eyes. "This isn't his," she snapped. "Look, it doesn't even belong to him." She raised the wallet for everyone to see. This was a setup. The captain emerged from the cockpit, sweat beading on his brow. He looked between Evelyn and Melinda, his gaze moving to the wallet. "This doesn't add up," he muttered, frowning. Melinda's smirk faltered. Her fingers twitched, but she kept her mask on. "He must have taken it earlier," she insisted. "I saw him. He's sneaky." That did it. Evelyn's fury, buried beneath layers of poise and control, ignited. "You're the only sneak here," she said, voice low and dangerous. "And I'll prove it." She pulled out her phone, hand steady. Scrolling fast, she found the photo she'd snapped earlier during the coffee spill. Melinda's hand, brushing against Louis's bag. It was blurry, but damning. She thrust the screen toward the captain. "There's your thief." "Enough," the captain growled, his voice low but commanding. "This stops now." He turned toward the rattled cabin and addressed the passengers directly, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "False alarm, folks. Please remain seated while we sort this out." Evelyn Brooks let out a shaky breath and sank into her seat, her legs barely holding. The stolen wallet, that planted lie, had been confiscated. Around her the air was thick with reluctant calm, like a match hovering near a dry fuse. She had diffused Melinda's latest assault just barely. Louis reached for her hand, his grip firm and warm. "Smart move," he murmured. She gave a slight nod, her chest rising with a glimmer of triumph. They'd exposed the setup. They'd outwitted her. Or so they thought. From across the aisle, the sharp click of heels echoed like gunfire. Melinda Crane stormed into the galley, her posture tight with rage. Evelyn could just barely hear her muttering to another crew member. "They won't get away with this," Melinda hissed. Evelyn's relief turned to ice. Moments later, the captain returned, his voice low, apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Sir, that was out of line. I'll handle her." Evelyn met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "Make sure you do." But her eyes didn't leave Melinda, who was now hunched over her radio in the shadows of the galley, speaking rapidly, her expression darkening with every word. Minutes passed. Then the captain's voice crackled through the intercom again, this time colder, more rehearsed. "Ground control has been alerted. We've been advised there's an incident involving unruly passengers. Law enforcement will be waiting upon arrival." The blood drained from Evelyn's face. Melinda's silhouette lingered just beyond the curtain, her lips twisted into a slow, poisonous smile. She'd done it again, twisted the narrative, weaponized her authority. And now she wasn't just accusing them, she was setting a trap they might not walk away from. Louis tightened his grip on her hand. "They're not done with us," he said softly. Evelyn nodded, her mind already spinning. This flight had stopped being a journey the second Melinda decided they didn't belong. Now it was a war, not just for respect, but for their freedom. The passengers shifted uneasily. Some stole glances, some whispered behind cupped hands. The bald man in the front muttered under his breath again. "Still don't trust him," he said. Evelyn felt it. The shift, the silent vote of suspicion from those too eager to believe lies that fit their bias. She looked toward the galley. Melinda was gone again, but her echo remained. The captain's earlier apology now rang hollow, drowned out by the growing threat outside. As the plane descended, Evelyn gripped the armrest, her heart hammering as she caught sight of flashing red and blue lights outside her window. Police cars circled the terminal like wolves around a carcass. Their victory in the sky had earned them a battlefield on the ground. The wheels screeched against the tarmac. The landing gear groaned. And Evelyn knew the fight wasn't over. Louis adjusted his glasses beside her. His face was unreadable, but she could feel the storm coiled inside him. Melinda had escalated her vendetta. Her fake radio call labeling them as a threat, unruly passengers, was now a noose tightening around their necks. Outside, the dusk bled into the cabin, casting long shadows as the buzz of anxious passengers swelled. The bald man craned his neck toward the window, eager to catch a glimpse of the spectacle. "Knew they were trouble," he whispered with satisfaction. The woman with hoop earrings clutched her phone, already tapping record. Melinda emerged once more, leaning smugly against the bulkhead near the exit, her blue eyes shining like glass. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her smirk said it all. "Let's see you get out of this one." The jet bridge connected with a hiss. The plane door opened, and 4 officers stormed aboard. Their boots hit the cabin floor like thunder, guns holstered, faces cold. The lead officer, burly and stone-jawed, shouted across the rows. "Evelyn Brooks, Louis Brooks, step forward. You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and theft." Gasps erupted. Evelyn's heart pounded so hard it hurt. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to her feet. Her voice was sharp, unshaken. "This is a setup. You need to look at the facts before you put your hands on us." The lead officer didn't flinch. His hand hovered near his cuffs, and his face twisted into a sneer. "Got a witness," he said. "Save it for the station, lady." Louis rose beside her, tall and resolute. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice deep, steady. The cabin buzzed with gasps. The teen with the camera leaned closer, his grin wide. The bald man nodded smugly. About time. Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears, but her mind didn't freeze. She fumbled in her purse, yanked out her phone, and brought up the photo, the blurry but damning image of Melinda's hand brushing Louis's bag. The timestamp aligned with the coffee spill. She shoved it toward the officer's face. "She framed us," she said. "There's your so-called witness." The officer narrowed his eyes, his thick fingers swiping across the screen. His expression shifted, not fully convinced, but no longer certain. In the image, Melinda's hand was too close, too casual, too calculated. From the back of the cabin, Melinda's voice rose in protest. "It's fake. They're lying." But Evelyn stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Check the zipper on the bag. Her prints will be there, not ours." The officer's radio crackled. He glanced at his partner, who stepped in, a wiry man with a trimmed mustache. He knelt by Louis's carry-on and inspected the bag. His gloved hand traced the zipper slowly. "No prints from him," he muttered. "She's telling the truth." The lead officer's jaw clenched. His gaze shifted toward Melinda, who stammered again. I didn't." They twisted it. "Step aside," the officer growled. "We're clearing this now." He waved his team back. The tension in the air snapped like a rubber band. The officers stepped back, the cuffs untouched on their belts. Slowly, they turned and exited the plane. Outside, their cars peeled away, the flashing lights disappearing one by one. Silence fell like a blanket over the cabin. Evelyn collapsed back into her seat, her body trembling. Louis took her hand again. His grip was strong. "We got through that one," he said, voice low. Evelyn nodded. A hard-earned flicker of triumph rose in her chest. She'd beaten the lie, exposed the setup, stripped Melinda of her cover in front of the whole plane. But as she looked toward the front, she saw Melinda's smirk slowly return, and with it a chill that slid down her spine. Because this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. The passengers shifted in their seats, some glaring, others whispering behind hands and magazines. The balding man, ever the voice of smugness, muttered from row 2, "Still don't belong here." Evelyn Brooks didn't so much as glance in his direction. Her sharp eyes were trained on Melinda Crane, who had finally slunk back to the galley, her posture no longer defiant but dragging with defeat. Or so it seemed. The captain soon emerged from the cockpit, his silver hair tousled, uniform collar wrinkled from stress. His voice was clipped and final. "She's off this flight," he said to Evelyn and Louis. "I'm filing a report." Evelyn nodded once, her tone cold and resolute. "Good. She's a liability." And for a moment she believed the nightmare might finally be behind them, that justice had landed, and this storm had been grounded before takeoff. But then the air shifted. A shadow darkened the entrance to the jet bridge, tall, composed, dangerous. A man stepped aboard with the smoothness of someone who knew the ground would never dare move beneath him. Dorian Maddox, operations executive of Monarch Air. His tailored Navy suit clung to him like armor. His steel-gray eyes locked on Evelyn's with a quiet venom that made her skin prickle. She recognized it. She had seen that same look across boardroom tables, in courtroom ambushes, in backroom deals signed with clenched teeth. He didn't need to say it. His eyes spoke volumes. "I didn't forget you, and I didn't forgive you." "Quite a mess," Dorian said, his voice like silk lined with razors. "I've been briefed." "And Melinda?" "She's only the beginning. You need to be reminded whose skies you're flying in." It was a dagger slid straight into Evelyn's chest. Melinda's eyes lit up. She practically glided toward him, her smirk blooming once again. "They embarrassed me, sir," she whispered, just loud enough for Evelyn to hear. "In front of everyone." Dorian nodded, gaze never leaving Evelyn. His lips curled into a faint smile. "Don't worry. They'll learn." The captain stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Sir, this is being handled." Dorian raised a hand. "Not yet. It's not." Evelyn's stomach dropped. Every alarm inside her went off. This wasn't just corporate retaliation. This was personal, and far more dangerous. Louis leaned closer. "He's not just trouble," he murmured. "He's strategy." Evelyn's mind raced. Dorian's vendetta wasn't fueled by pride alone. It was systemic, and now it had teeth sharper than Melinda's. The passengers sensed the tension. Phones reappeared. The young woman with the hoop earrings resumed recording. The balding man grinned with glee. "Now this is getting good," he said, rubbing his hands together. Dorian turned to the cabin crew like a general addressing his soldiers. Anyone who supported them? Suspended. Effective immediately. Two attendants exchanged nervous glances, then stepped away from the cabin quietly. Their badges gleamed as they handed them over. Silent, stunned. Loyal to Evelyn, now branded traitors by Dorian's iron decree. Evelyn's hard-won triumph dissolved before her eyes. Her control felt like a paper wall in the path of a hurricane. She locked eyes with Dorian, standing as tall as her battered body allowed. "You don't scare me." His low chuckle echoed through the cabin. "I don't have to. I just have to win." Then he turned and strode off the plane, leaving a cold vacuum in his wake. Evelyn's pulse thundered. Her world, the one she had built from nothing, was under siege. Not by angry passengers or petty attendants, but by a man with power and hatred to match. Every step forward now would be war. She and Louis stepped off the plane into the thick Georgia night, the lights of Roosevelt International harsh and humming. The terminal buzzed with late-night movement, but to Evelyn it felt strangely still. as if time had slowed just to let her feel the weight of Dorian's promise. She glanced at Louis. His silver hair caught the glow of a neon sign. He didn't say a word, but she could feel the storm in him too. Vanessa had slinked away. The police had backed off. But Dorian? He was just getting started. Their next flight, a short morning hop to Ellis City, was supposed to be quiet, simple, a moment to regroup. Evelyn had scrubbed the coffee stains from her skirt in the airport bathroom with a vengeance. Her thighs ached, but her hands were steady. She'd looked Louis in the eye and said, "Tomorrow we fly again. We show them we don't break." His nod had been quiet, but resolute. They checked into a nearby hotel, slept with the kind of exhaustion that only battle brings. And by dawn, they were back at Gate 7, tickets in hand. First class. Again. The terminal buzzed with morning travelers, blissfully unaware of the storm Evelyn carried under her calm expression. She settled into her seat as the plane prepared for takeoff. The plush leather offered little comfort. Louis opened a newspaper beside her, his glasses catching the overhead light as the plane taxied. For the first time in hours, Evelyn allowed herself to breathe. This was a new day, a clean slate, until the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Melinda's voice purred, cutting through the cabin. "Due to a booking error, some passengers will need to be reseated. Evelyn and Louis Brooks, please make your way to economy." Evelyn's eyes snapped open. Louis's newspaper dropped. The balding man, somehow on this flight again, let out a wheezing laugh. "Back where they fit," he said. A woman in a green sweater muttered, "Figures? Them again." Evelyn stood, fury trembling in her chest. "Check your records. We paid for these seats." Melinda appeared, strutting down the aisle, her smirk bright. "System says otherwise. Time to move, sweetie." Evelyn's mind raced. Dorian's voice echoed in her head. "This isn't your airline. This wasn't a glitch. It was sabotage." Louis's hands clenched the armrests, his jaw locked. The captain's voice came over the speaker, uncertain. Folks, we're sorting this. Please remain seated." Melinda leaned in close to Evelyn, her breath hot. "Guess you're not so special now." Evelyn's rage flashed. Her words came sharp. "You're just his puppet. He's pulling your strings." Melinda smiled wider and turned to the cabin. "They're holding us up, folks. Let's give 'em a send-off." The cabin erupted. Applause, jeers, mock cheers. From the back, a teenage girl with box braids shouted, "Just go already?" Evelyn stood her ground. But inside, she knew this wasn't just about a seat. It was about who controlled the sky. The jeers stabbed like knives as Evelyn Brooks felt the weight of the plane cabin shift entirely against her. Her seat in first class no longer felt earned. It felt targeted, and Dorian Maddox's hand was behind it all. She clenched her phone tightly, her fingers trembling, dialing Denise Langford, a longtime ally on Monarch Air's board. Her voice was hushed, but urgent. "Check the booking system. Dorian's messing with it. I know it." The response came almost immediately. "Holy hell, he's in the back end. I see his digital trail. Sit tight. I'm patching the override." Moments later, the captain's voice returned over the intercom, stuttering, uncertain. Correction. Brooks' party remains in first class. System error resolved." Evelyn collapsed back into her seat, her chest heaving. The passengers around her groaned. From the front, the balding man muttered, "Figures they'd wiggle out again." But the wind felt shallow. Melinda Crane passed by, slow and deliberate, her smirk intact. Her radio buzzed softly, whispering plans not yet played. She wasn't done. Evelyn let herself exhale, thinking the worst was behind her, until they landed. She opened her bag at baggage claim and froze. Nothing inside. A clerk shrugged. "Says it was rerouted to Denver. System glitch. Louis's suitcase? Gone too. stranded with nothing. Her knuckles whitened as she clenched her fists. This wasn't just interference. This was full-blown sabotage. And then her phone buzzed again. A headline flashed across the screen like a slap. Elderly couple cons airline for first-class scam. Below it, a quote from Dorian. "We're investigating fraudulent behavior and staff abuse. No one is above the rules." Evelyn's breath caught. The public's fury had already ignited. Social media flooded with comments. "Throw them out. Frauds in first class. Entitled scammers." Dorian had flipped the script. He'd turned her win into a public crucifixion. Her name was now a meme, a headline, a weapon. Louis reached for her hand, grounding her. "We'll fight this," he said simply. And Evelyn nodded, calling Denise again, her voice steel. "Leak the truth? Leak everything. I own Monarch Air, and I'm done being erased." Denise didn't hesitate, already on it. But the smear had momentum. The fallout came fast. At the gate, strangers glared at her. A man in a baseball cap spat the word "scammers" as he passed. Evelyn kept her gaze forward, but her spine straightened. The victory in the sky, the retreat of the police, now felt like a dream from another life. Dorian's reach ran deeper than she'd imagined, and his lies sharper than any blade. She steeled herself. This was no longer a dispute. It was a battle for her legacy. The terminal in Ellis City buzzed with static and suspicion. News alerts kept pinging her phone. Everywhere she turned, screens flashed the same headline. Couple grifts airline, poses as owners. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Each passerby was another accuser. A man in a plaid shirt whispered, "There's the fraud." The heat of his stare stung more than his words. Beside her, Louis adjusted his glasses. He said nothing, but his hand on her elbow never wavered. They walked silently toward the rental car counter, together but surrounded by a world that wanted them split, shamed, or silent. Denise's leak was out, proving ownership of Monarch Air, but it hadn't gone viral yet. Truth moved slower than rage. Evelyn's skirt still bore the faint stains from Melinda's coffee attack. Her arm ached, but she walked tall. "We've been through worse," she whispered to Louis, "and we'll beat this too." He nodded. The next day, Evelyn awoke, determined. Her voice would not be drowned out again. She dressed with purpose, her hair pinned back, her coat crisp. She was going to reclaim the narrative. Live. The terminal was a mess of Friday chaos. Overhead, flight announcements clashed with the rumble of luggage wheels and toddler cries. Evelyn clutched her phone, scanning for the message. "Denise, leak is catching fire. Press is picking it up. You're golden." A lifeline? She held that text like armor as she stepped up to the check-in counter, voice calm but unwavering. "First class, Brooks." The attendant smiled politely. No venom, no suspicion, just a scan and a nod. "You're all set, a small win, a breath of calm." Until the screaming started. A roar echoed from the concourse. A mob surged toward them, signs waving, phones raised, eyes burning, their faces twisted in rage. Thieves out, no scammers in first class. Dorian's campaign had worked. He'd sparked a vigilante fire, and now it was an inferno. A burly man in a trucker cap pushed to the front. "You don't belong here," he bellowed. "Go back where you came from." A soda bottle flew, smacked Evelyn's shoulder, sticky liquid splashing across her sleeve. She stumbled, caught by Louis's steady arm. Another voice, younger, nastier, spat from the crowd. "You stole those seats." A woman with a cross necklace screamed, "You're a disgrace." The mob pressed closer. Evelyn's mind raced. Her elbow throbbed, blood seeping from a new wound, a shattered bottle this time. She shouted above the chaos, "We own this airline! Stop this madness!" But the mob didn't care. Their fury was louder than her facts. Their cameras were raised, eager to immortalize her pain. not her truth. Louis stepped forward, blocking her with his frame. "Back off. Now." His voice cracked like thunder, but it wasn't enough. A wiry man in a red hat swung his arm, fist grazing Louis's jaw. That's when Evelyn snapped. Her 72 years of endurance, of building, surviving, rising, surged forward. She grabbed a protester's dropped sign and raised it like a shield, shouting, "You're wrong, all of you!" The crowd hesitated, just for a second, and in that sliver of stillness she saw the truth. Security stood watching, one officer chewing gum, another checking his watch, not moving, bought off, or afraid, or both. Dorian's influence had seeped everywhere. He'd turned protectors into spectators. And Evelyn was in the center of a war zone, alone but unyielding. Then another projectile flew, a hot cup of coffee. This one hit her square in the chest. The heat, the sting, the humiliation. Again. She staggered, her vision blurring. Louis's voice cut through. "We have to move." The crowd's chants grew louder. Thieves, liars, trash. And Evelyn knew. This wasn't just a PR disaster. It was a war, one meant to destroy her from the inside out. The lid of the coffee cup burst on impact, scalding liquid splattering across Evelyn Brooks's chest. The burn stung, a cruel echo of Melinda Crane's earlier stunt. She staggered, blinking through a blur of pain as Louis caught her, guiding her toward a nearby service door. "We need to get out." "Now," he muttered. His glasses were fogged with sweat, his breath heavy. They slipped through the metal door, slamming it behind them. The mob's chants of "thieves, thieves" still rang through the steel like distant war drums. Evelyn leaned against the wall, her coat drenched with soda and now coffee. Her elbow throbbed, blood seeping from a glass-cut wound. She thought they'd escaped, that this was the worst of it. But then came the sirens. Louis peeked through a narrow window, his expression darkening. They torched the car. Evelyn's breath caught. Their rental, now a flaming husk, lit up the lot. The sky streaked orange with fire. Cheers erupted from the mob outside, the heat of their hatred now literal. Inside the maintenance hall, the air was thick with the stink of oil and smoke. A nearby TV blared from a dusty breakroom screen. Dorian Maddox, live. "This is what happens when you let people like them run things," he said, his cold gaze steady. "They bullied our staff. They stole from the company. We're investigating." His words weren't just lies. They were gasoline. Evelyn wiped blood from her arm with a trembling hand. Her mind spun. This wasn't random. Dorian had lit this fire, and now he was feeding it on every network. She turned to Louis, her voice a whisper of steel. "He's not stopping." Her resolve crystallized in that moment. The press conference wouldn't be enough. This wasn't a PR war. It was a personal one. Violent, public, intentional. They ducked deeper into the shadows of the hall, Evelyn's arm burning, her breath shallow. Louis tore his sleeve and tied it around her wound. Steady hands, calm voice. "We'll hit back harder." But then, footsteps. A security guard rounded the corner, his radio crackling. He didn't flinch at the wreckage outside, didn't call for backup. Instead, he murmured into his mic, "Maddox says, let the crowd burn out." Evelyn's jaw locked. Her 72 years of resilience surged through her. Dorian's reach was suffocating. Even the guards were his now. She stood taller despite the pain, knowing this mob was just an opening act. Dorian's real strike would come fast, quiet, legal, and it would be deadly. They slipped out the back of Ellis City Airport, bloodied but standing. Evelyn's arm still dripped beneath Louis's makeshift bandage. They hailed a cab, ducking the crowd's fading roars, riding in silence to a small downtown hotel. Dawn came gray and heavy. Evelyn changed into a fresh blouse, her wound cleaned and wrapped. Her voice was steady, her presence firm as they entered the rented conference room. The air buzzed with anticipation. Cameras flashed. Reporters jostled. Louis stood beside her, his glasses now polished, his posture unshakable. Evelyn faced the mic. "I'm Evelyn Brooks," she began, "co-owner of Monarch Air, Dorian Maddox's Lies End Today. We built this company, not him." She held up stock certificates, deeds, proof of their legacy, undeniable, stamped truth. A young reporter in a blazer stammered, You're the owners?" An older journalist nodded. "I've seen the filings. It checks out." The room rippled with gasps, and Evelyn's chest lifted. For a moment, the mob faded. The fire, the cuts, the bottle, forgotten. They were being heard. Denise's leaked documents were now headlines. Monarch owners targeted in executive smear plot. Louis gave her a faint smile. It was rare. It was enough. She thought they had won. Until the sirens screamed again. The doors burst open. Boots pounded the linoleum. Flashing lights filled the room. 12 officers poured into the conference center. At their helm stood a gaunt man with a jagged scar on his cheek. He barked, "Evelyn Brooks, Louis Brooks, you're under arrest for embezzlement. Step away from the podium." Evelyn froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Cameras clicked like machine guns. Cuffs clamped around Louis's wrists. He flinched. His glasses slipped. "This is insanity," Evelyn shouted. "What proof?" The officer threw a stack of documents at her. Forged ledgers, fake withdrawals, false signatures, her name scrawled in ink she didn't recognize. Millions missing from Monarch Air. A lie so bold it left her breathless. Flashbulbs burst. "Did you steal from your own company?" one reporter yelled. Evelyn staggered. Louis's voice cut through. "Check the records. It's fake." But the officer scoffed. "Tell it to the judge." He shoved Louis toward the door. Evelyn lunged after him, shouting over the chaos, "Call my lawyer!" At the precinct, their attorney Lena Hart arrived, a wiry woman with a case full of fire. She threw open her briefcase and laid out pristine financials. No inconsistencies, no theft. "These ledgers are forgeries," she snapped. The evidence was damning. Against Dorian, not Evelyn. Within the hour, the cuffs came off. Evelyn rubbed her wrists, the press conference victory now a ghost in the rear view. "They've got nothing," Lena said, flashing a sharp smile. "You're free." Evelyn thought they'd finally dodged the bullet until they returned to the hotel. At the front desk, a clerk handed Evelyn an envelope. Her fingers shook as she opened it. A court order, assets frozen, bank accounts seized, investigation pending, signed by a judge. And in the fine print, Dorian Maddox's name. He'd paid off the courts. Her shoulders slumped. Her eyes traced the words slowly, each sentence a blade. Everything they had built, locked away overnight. Louis's hand gripped hers. His voice was quiet. "He's not finished." Evelyn nodded, her jaw tightening, her grit flaring once more. Dorian didn't want to beat her. He wanted to erase her. Her empire, once towering, now stood hollow. Evelyn Brooks stared at the court order in her trembling hands, her bandaged arm still aching from the chaos days before. It was official, her accounts frozen, her assets seized. Penniless. Despite the fact that her name was on the deeds, the papers, the founding documents of Monarch Air. Across from her in the dim hotel lobby, Louis sat rigid, his fists clenched. "He's not done," he murmured, his voice low and cold. Evelyn didn't argue. Her 72 years of survival had sharpened her instincts. This wasn't revenge. It was erasure. On the hotel TV, Dorian Maddox's smug face returned to the screen. "We're cleaning house," he said. "Those two won't see a dime." His eyes sparkled with malice. Evelyn's chest tightened. Her victory at the press conference was now drowned under a tidal wave of legal sleaze and media distortion. The phone rang. Lena Hart's voice crackled through, tight and urgent. "He's got a judge in his pocket. I'm fighting it, but your money's locked." Evelyn swallowed. Each step forward was a trap. She turned to Louis and whispered, "We'll rebuild." But even to her the words felt brittle. The hotel lights flickered over the shadow cast by the bandage on her arm. Her body was battered, her spirit tested, and she knew this wasn't the final blow. It was just the beginning. Later that night, Evelyn sat at the edge of the bed in their downtown Atlanta suite. Her sharp eyes scanned the fine print on the judge's order again. Each line read like a dagger. Her hands shook. Louis paced, his hair disheveled, a cup of untouched coffee steaming beside him. They'd survived mobs, media lies, and legal ambushes. But this was systemic sabotage. She took a breath and spoke, voice like iron. "We've still got people. Loyal ones." Louis nodded. "Let's use them." They called Lena, who immediately began digging. The next morning, Evelyn met with a small circle of trusted Monarch staff in a cramped diner off Peachtree Street. Her blouse was crisp, her posture sharp, her mind already assembling the pieces of a new plan. "Dorian's running this smear campaign through the company infrastructure," she said. "Emails, calls, anything we can trace. I want it." A young IT tech named Jamal looked up from his laptop. "I'm in the back end. Give me a few hours." He returned the same afternoon. "Got it. Racist emails, internal communications, and—" He paused. "Dorian's fingerprints are all over them." Evelyn felt something light inside her chest, the first flicker of hope in days. "Send it to every outlet," she said. "Expose him." By noon, the headline lit up every screen. Monarch execs, racist emails, leaked, suspension imminent. Quotes in Dorian's own words. "Keep them grounded. People like that don't belong at the top." The blow landed like thunder. On the TV above the diner, a news anchor stammered. "Dorian Maddox, now suspended, pending internal investigation." Evelyn smiled. It was faint, but real. Her grit had paid off. Louis grinned. "He's done." They booked a private jet that evening. It was time to return to Atlanta, time to reclaim what was stolen. The small jet lifted off at dusk. Evelyn leaned back in her leather seat, her arm resting in a sling, the weight of exhaustion pressing on her chest. Louis flipped through printed emails, glasses reflecting the screen's glow. For a moment, they believed they'd won. Then the jet bucked. A loud shudder shook the cabin. The engines coughed, a high-pitched whine piercing the air. Louis's coffee spilled across the tray. "What's happening?" he barked. The voice from the cockpit cracked over the intercom. Terry, the pilot they'd flown with for years, shouted, "Engines failing! Brace yourselves!" The world tilted. Evelyn grabbed Louis's hand, her voice steady despite the fear. "We're not dying today." The plane plunged. Alarms blared. Evelyn's stomach flipped. Her 72 years flashed before her eyes. Then, a jolt. The backup engines roared to life. Terry's voice returned. "Leveling off. We're landing. Hard." The wheels slammed into a rural airstrip outside Douglas County, gravel scraping under metal. The plane skidded, then stopped. Silence. Evelyn gasped for air. Louis's arm wrapped around her. His breath was unsteady. They stumbled from the jet into the cold night air. Terry wiped his brow, shaking. "It was sabotage," he mumbled. "Fuel lines were cut." Evelyn's spine stiffened. Her voice turned ice. Who had access? Terry's eyes darted. I checked everything myself," he stammered. She stepped closer. "Who, Terry?" The pilot's shoulders slumped. Tears welled in his eyes. "He blackmailed me." "Maddox, my kid's sick. He promised to pay the hospital bills." Evelyn's fists curled. "You endangered us," she growled. Terry crumbled to his knees, then bolted, disappearing into the woods. Her knees buckled, Louis catching her. Terry had been family. Now he was a traitor. The jet sat in ruins behind them, a symbol of shattered trust. Evelyn and Louis hitched a ride back to the city, her blouse torn, her arm throbbing. The wreckage echoed through her mind. Dorian's suspension hadn't neutered him. It had unleashed him. He was twisting her world from within, turning allies into weapons. Survival was no longer guaranteed. She turned to Louis, his jaw set like granite. "We're not safe," she whispered. His hand found hers. She knew this wasn't the end. This was the calm before a more brutal storm, a storm with no mercy, no rules, and one goal: to erase her legacy. Evelyn Brooks sat hunched over the grain of the wooden table in her dimly lit hotel room. The ticking of the clock was drowned out by the hum of silence. Louis, ever steady, sat beside her, steam rising from a mug of untouched tea as his glasses fogged in the low light. They hadn't spoken much since the crash. The betrayal from Terry, the near-death plunge, and the unraveling of their financial control had left more than bruises. The scabbed cuts on Evelyn's arms were nothing compared to the weight sitting on her shoulders. Her 72-year-old body ached, her blouse torn, her strength pushed to the edge. But her mind? Her mind burned hotter than ever. Dorian Maddox's suspension hadn't slowed him. It had emboldened him. "I want to sue him," she whispered to Louis, fire threading through her voice. "Take it all. Legally." Louis nodded, a silent agreement, her anchor as always. They called Lena Hart, and within hours she had begun drafting the case. Emails, audio clips, Terry's confession. They were going to peel Dorian down to the bone. Days blurred into strategy meetings, courtroom filings, evidence compilation. When Evelyn finally stood in the Atlanta Superior Court, she wore a crisp navy suit, her arm in a sling. Cameras flashed from every corner of the room. She raised her voice, steady and clear. "He's tried to destroy us because of who we are, but Monarch Air is ours, and we'll prove it." Louis stood beside her, his deep voice ringing out. "He's the fraud, not us." Lena dropped the bomb, the racist emails, the falsified ledgers, the threats, all in black and white. The judge, a stoic woman with silver curls, didn't need to deliberate long. Her gavel cracked with finality. Dorian Maddox's executive privileges are hereby revoked. Case closed. The courtroom erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters jostled for quotes. Owners victorious in corruption case. Evelyn felt a rare lightness in her chest. At the defense table, Dorian stared daggers, his tailored suit pristine, but his empire crumbling. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. She met his gaze and didn't blink. That night, the gala at the Marston Grant Hotel sparkled with chandeliers and champagne. Evelyn wore a deep blue gown, her sling adorned with a velvet ribbon. Louis walked beside her in a sharp suit. Board members raised their glasses. Applause echoed through the ballroom. She stepped onto the stage. "This airline," she said, her voice firm and proud, "was built from nothing. And no one, not hatred, not sabotage, will take it from us." The room roared. It felt like the final chapter. Louis leaned close, his voice low. "We did it." Evelyn smiled faintly, letting herself believe, until the crack of a gunshot shattered the night. Glass exploded. A bullet tore through the air, grazing Evelyn's shoulder. Pain seared across her upper arm. She stumbled. Louis caught her. His glasses clattered to the marble floor. Screams filled the ballroom. People ducked under tables. A board member shouted, "Get down!" Evelyn hit the floor, clutching her shoulder, blood blooming across her gown. But her mind didn't spiral. It sharpened. She scanned the room, caught a flash of movement, a figure slipping out a side door. Louis tore his tie free, pressing it to her wound. "Stay with me," he shouted, panic cracking his voice. Security stormed in, radio squawking. Shooter fled. Perimeters clear. Target escaped. The ballroom, moments ago a celebration, now smelled of fear and blood. Evelyn's lips trembled as she hissed one name: Dorian. At the hospital, her arm was cleaned and stitched. The bandages were tight, her spirit tighter. Louis paced by the window, his shirt stained crimson, face drawn. The TV flickered on. There he was again. Dorian Maddox. Live. Smooth. Cold. They staged the attack, he said. It's a sympathy ploy. I'm the victim here. The words slithered into homes nationwide. Online comments twisted fast. She's faking it. Total scam. Monarch deserves better. Evelyn's stomach sank. The bullet was real, but to the world? It was just another headline in a sea of doubt. A detective entered, a blunt woman with a notepad and a blank face. We found nothing, she said. No prints, no footage. He's clean. Evelyn's mind raced. Not clean, covered, paid off. Dorian wasn't just desperate, he was lethal. She reached for Louis's hand, his fingers tight around hers. He's not stopping, he murmured. She nodded. This isn't about the airline anymore, she whispered. It's life or death. Days passed, bandages changed, painkillers worn off. Evelyn's mind never stopped. This wasn't random, she muttered to Lena. He hired that shooter. There has to be proof. Lena was already digging. Then, one morning, the lawyer burst into the hospital room, her briefcase flung open, papers spilling. I've got it, she said, breathless. The hotel's security cam caught the hitman. Evelyn sat up straighter. And, she demanded? Transfer of funds, Lena said, slapping down the records. From an offshore account tied to Maddox. It's undeniable. Evelyn's chest swelled. Her plan snapped into focus. Leak everything. Tonight, we bury him. By nightfall, the footage was everywhere. A hooded man leaving the hotel. A wire transfer. A signature from Dorian's shell company. The internet exploded. Anchors stammered through breaking updates. Monarch exec linked to attempted assassination. Arrest warrant issued. Police raided Dorian's high-rise office. Cameras rolled live as cuffs clicked over his wrists. He thrashed. This is a setup, but the evidence was crushing. Evelyn watched it all from her hospital bed, her shoulders still raw, her heart finally steady. Louis stood beside her. The sunrise bathed the room in gold. You did it, he said. She nodded. This felt like the end. But somewhere in her gut, she knew. Dorian always had one more move. Evelyn Brooks watched the news as Dorian Maddox was led out of his office in handcuffs, live for the world to see. His steel gray eyes cut into the camera as he barked, "This is a setup," but the board wasn't buying it anymore. That night they called Evelyn, their voices shaken but sure. "You're back in full control. Maddox is out." She hung up the phone and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped for weeks. At last, Monarch Air was hers again. She left the hospital the next morning, her arm in a sling, Louis by her side in a freshly pressed suit. Their penthouse in downtown Norrington felt like a fortress for the first time in weeks. Loyal execs gathered in the conference room. Evelyn, standing tall despite the ache in her side, gave the order. No more shadows. We rebuild now. The room hummed with hopeful energy. Her redemption felt real. Until her phone lit up at 3 a.m. System breach. Entire airline grounded. She bolted upright, logging into her laptop with shaking fingers. Red warnings blinked across the screen. Every reservation. Wiped. Every flight. Locked. Every crew. Grounded. Louis stumbled out of bed, glasses askew. What the hell is going on? Evelyn stared at the screen in disbelief, her stomach twisting. Her face was already splashed across the morning headlines. Brooks to blame for Monarch meltdown, thousands stranded. Was it negligence or sabotage? The people had turned. Again. She called Jamal, the IT tech. His voice was tight, rushed. It's an inside job. Someone's got high-level access. Her eyes narrowed, fury sharpening into clarity. Who? Oh, pause. Then, Vanessa. She's in the system. Same credentials from last year. Vanessa Price, the flight attendant who had started it all. Still poisoning Monarch. Still under Dorian's influence, even from behind bars. Evelyn stormed to the headquarters, sling pulled tight across her shoulder. Her heart hammered as she reviewed security footage. There she was, Vanessa, at a company terminal, ponytail bouncing, fingers dancing across the keyboard, smirking, streaming the sabotage like a silent victory. Evelyn didn't flinch. She called Lena Hart immediately. "Arrest her. I have everything." Hours later, Vanessa was pulled from her apartment, her laptop seized. Within the day, Monarch systems rebooted, flights resumed, new headlines flashed, sabotage confirmed, former employee behind system crash. Evelyn's name cleared again, but the damage lingered. Passengers weren't forgiving, profits plummeted, stockholders wavered. She sat at the long boardroom table, charts blinking red across the wall, Louis's hand resting on hers. For a moment, she believed they'd finally turned the corner, until her phone rang. A board member. Voice cold. "Maddox's allies are moving. They're staging a vote. You're losing control." Her heart plummeted. Even behind bars, he was still pulling strings. She turned to Louis. "They're not done." Vanessa's hack had been a distraction. This was the coup, the final strike to reclaim Monarch from within. The boardroom buzzed with whispers. Some glanced at her with sympathy, others with suspicion. She stood, her voice clear. "We hold the line," but the numbers glared at her. Votes shifting, support bleeding away. It was no longer a battle for the airline, it was a war for her very soul. The next morning, Evelyn and Louis entered the Norrington International Employee Lounge. Unannounced, her sling hidden under a long coat, her phone live-streaming to a reporter she trusted. A red dot blinked in the corner. Vanessa didn't notice them at first. She stood by a vending machine, typing on a tablet, that same smug curl on her lips. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sharp and loud. "You thought you could bury us, but it ends today." Vanessa's head snapped up, her blue eyes narrowed. Evelyn hit the record button. "Tell the world how Maddox recruited you, how he's still pulling strings from his cell." Vanessa sneered, tossing the tablet onto the floor. "You think you're untouchable because you're old and black?" she spat. "Maddox saw through you? I just finished the job." Evelyn's chest swelled, not with pain, but power. The confession streamed live, thousands watching. Comments flooded in. "She's done. That's the truth. Maddox is toast." Then the door slammed open. Dorian Maddox, free on bail, in a spotless suit, eyes wild, flanked by 3 men in black leather and silent menace. Evelyn's body went cold. Maddox snarled, "Turn that off, now." Vanessa stumbled toward him. "I didn't mean—" He shoved her aside. His gaze locked on Evelyn. "You've got guts," he growled. "Sign Monarch over, or he dies." One of his men yanked Louis forward. A knife flashed. Cold steel pressed to his throat. Evelyn froze. Her phone slipped. The live stream cut. Louis didn't flinch. "Don't do it," he said, voice firm even as blood welled at his skin. Maddox's laugh was hollow. "Too late. You pushed me." The room shrank around Evelyn Brooks as Dorian Maddox barked his threat, the blade pressed to Louis's neck, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Gasps erupted. A janitor dropped his mop and fled. 72 years of grit surged through Evelyn's battered frame. She knew this was Maddox's last stand, feral, cornered, dangerous. Her sharp eyes darted toward the wall. She lunged. Her fingers slammed a hidden panel, a silent alarm she'd had installed years ago, long before she ever thought she'd need it. Its faint blue pulse flickered once. Security was on the way. But Maddox only sneered. Not fast enough. One of his thugs lunged, yanking Evelyn's sling. Pain exploded down her arm as she screamed. Her knees buckled, but not her mind. She spotted a fire extinguisher mounted nearby, and with her good arm ripped it free, swinging it wide. Foam blasted into the thug's face, his scream echoing through the chaos. Louis took the chance, slamming his elbow into his attacker's ribs. The blade fell, but Maddox roared, pulling a gun. Enough! His steely eyes locked on Evelyn. Sign it, or I shoot him myself. Evelyn's heart pounded, her breath hitched. She played the only card left, strategy. I'll sign. Her voice trembled as she reached for the contract Maddox threw across the table, his grin smug. Sure. She scrolled the tablet. The alarm blinked again. Security was close. Very close. She faked her signature just long enough. The doors burst open. Monarch security stormed in, tasers crackling, boots thudding. The thugs dropped like dominoes, Maddox's gun skittering across the floor. His eyes widened. No! But it was too late. Guards tackled him. Cuffs clicked shut. Vanessa sobbed as officers dragged her off, her betrayal exposed. But Evelyn wasn't celebrating. She dropped to her knees. Louis lay in a pool of blood, stabbed in the chaos. His glasses were shattered beside him. She pressed both hands to the wound, blood soaking her coat. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Stay with me." Paramedics swarmed. "He's alive. Move." They hoisted him onto a gurney, Evelyn stumbling after them, her hands shaking, soaked in red. The showdown was over. Maddox's network shattered, but the cost? Too high. Later that night, Evelyn sat by Louis's hospital bed, her eyes fixed on the slow, steady beep of his heart monitor. The news blared. Dorian Maddox convicted. Vanessa Price sentenced. Monarch Air returned to its rightful owner. But the headlines meant nothing. Not while Louis lay unconscious. Tubes, machines, wounds. A nurse handed her his phone. Unlocked. She scrolled through the last text he'd sent, one she never saw. Sold half to Delta. Funds for Evelyn's fight. She wins, or none of this matters. He had made a secret deal, sacrificed half their empire, to bet on her. His rasp broke through the silence. "You're stronger than me," he whispered. Evelyn's chest cracked open. He'd gambled everything for her to win. The board called the next day. Delta was suing, but Evelyn didn't flinch. Her voice was quiet. Cold steel. Let them. Because she wasn't just fighting for Monarch Air anymore. She was fighting for him. The screen faded to black, then back to Evelyn, sitting tall despite her sling, her voice closing out the story. 72 years of pain, of being told I don't belong, built me for this. You want to beat the system? You better be ready to bleed for it. I did. But I'm still here.